northwestern parts of Scotland, but here that's where we're going to see the frost, and we will start to see some showers just edging their way into eastern parts of Scotland too. Once again, we could see some winteriness to these showers, particularly across high ground in the hills of Scotland. And that's pretty much the setup for the rest of the day. Still a fair amount of cloud around. It could be quite drizzly at times. Still a chance we could see some flurries of snow across high ground in Wales, parts of the Pennines, and the best of the brightness once again to the far northwest of the country. But for all, it is still going to be feeling like a chilly day, particularly in exposed spots in those brisk winds. For the second half of the weekend, once again, plenty of cloud around, but the best of the brightness still across northern parts of Scotland, perhaps less so across parts of Wales. For many, it's going to be a cloudy day, some drizzle at times, and still a very small chance we could see some winteriness across the hills. And that cloud sticks around for the beginning of next week too, and that means temperatures are going to struggle, so still feeling rather chilly. Bye-bye.
We can expect clear skies, leading to a light and warm day ahead. Lovely. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We're giving you not one, but 2 chances to win this month, with 2 prize bundles that include an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash. But that's not all. You'll also get a brand new iPhone 16 and a £500 shopping voucher to spend at your favourite store. So why not be extra lucky this month? For a chance to win an iPhone, vouchers and £10,000 in cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christys tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christys tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening. You're watching State of the Nation tonight on GB News with me, Matt Goodwin, the show that speaks up for you, the forgotten majority. On tonight's show, a new mega poll has predicted a three-way tie at the next general election, with Labour cabinet ministers set to lose their seats and Nigel Farage holding the balance of power. Are we on the precipice of a political revolution? We'll be looking at that tonight. Here's a headline I expect you never thought you would hear. Lego bricks are apparently anti-LGBT. That's according to the London Science Museum. We'll be talking about the end of gender ideology. Today, through gritted teeth, Ed Miliband has been forced to back down on his opposition to the Heathrow expansion. Is it time that he back down on the rest of his net zero vanity project? Newly released data shows housing prices are at a record high. Can we ever get control over the housing market if we cannot control the immigration crisis? I'll be discussing with a top expert tonight. That's State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin, starts right now. Now, I'll also be joined tonight by my top panel. At least I'm hoping to be joined by Labour advisor Stella Santakidou on her way from Westminster, and former spokesman here in the studio with me for Reform UK, Gawain Towler. As ever, let me know your views at gbnews.com/your say. Hit me up on X at GoodwinMJ. But for now, it's time for the News Bulletin with Sam Francis.
Very good evening to you. A recap of the top stories at just after 8 o'clock. We'll start in the United States, where on day 19 of Donald Trump's second term in office, Japan has committed to doubling its defence spending by 2027. Well, a joint news conference has just wrapped up where Donald Trump has pledged the full strength of American defence to its ally as both nations ramp up cooperation against China and tackle North Korea's nuclear ambitions. Japan's Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba promised $1 trillion of investment in the United States, calling it unprecedented. The leaders also both vowed to lead the world in AI, semiconductors and energy development across the Indo-Pacific. Turning now to the Middle East, where Hamas has named the next hostages to be freed in Gaza this weekend, including 3 men. They are Eli Sharabi, Ohad Ben-Ami and Or Levi. 18 hostages have been released so far, with Israel freeing 383 Palestinian prisoners in return. By the end of this ceasefire stage, 33 hostages and 1,900 prisoners are expected to have been released, though Israel says, sadly, 8 of the hostages are dead. Meanwhile, Hamas has accused Israel of blocking critical humanitarian aid, a claim disputed by the United Nations. Here at home, the government has confirmed that Grenfell Tower will be dismantled nearly 8 years after a fire killed 72 people. The process will take around 2 years and be done sensitively, with no changes made before June's anniversary of the disaster. The decision follows warnings that the damaged building is deteriorating and only remains stable due to protective measures. Local people and survivors, though, are divided. Some want the tower to remain as a memorial, while others say it's too distressing. Officials have said materials will be preserved, though, for a potential memorial if the community wishes. A man who murdered his partner's toddler after staying up late playing video games has been jailed for life today with a minimum term of 25 years. Christopher Stockton inflicted fatal head injuries on 22-month-old Charlie Roberts at their home last January. The boy's mother, Paula Roberts, admitted neglecting him by failing to seek treatment for the injuries Stockton caused and was jailed for 4 years. The judge said Stockton's actions were excruciatingly painful for the young boy, and only he knew why he inflicted the fatal blow. Detectives also called it a heartbreaking case and urged people to report concerns about child welfare. A new poll is predicting a 3-way tie at the next general election, with Labour cabinet ministers set to lose their seats and Nigel Farage holding the balance of power. The survey of almost 6,000 people found Reform UK would have 175 seats, up from only 5. Labour would drop, though, from 412 to 174, and the Tories would gain around 50. It would mean Wes Streeting, Yvette Cooper and Angela Rayner would be among those to lose their seats, with a Conservative and Reform coalition the most likely outcome. ITV has pulled Gino D'Acampo's shows from its schedule after accusations of inappropriate and intimidating behaviour on set. Family Fortunes and Secret of the South have been replaced this weekend, with no plans to air a new series filmed last October. ITV says dozens of people accused the chef of aggressive and sexualised language, though he denies the claims and calls them deeply upsetting. And just before I hand you back to Matt, the King and Queen are hosting Hollywood actor and foodie Stanley Tucci tonight for a black tie dinner at Highgrove, celebrating Italian cuisine and sustainable food. The feast uses British ingredients blended with Italian traditions inspired by his TV series Exploring Italy. The royal couple will also promote so-called slow fashion, meeting students showcasing sustainable garments. Meanwhile, Buckingham Palace has also confirmed a state visit in April to Italy and the Vatican to mark Charles and Camilla's 20th wedding anniversary. That's the news on GB News. I'll be back with you in around an hour. Now, though, it's over to Matt.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to news alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back, everybody, to State of the Nation tonight with me, Matt Goodwin. Now, that bombshell mega poll in British politics today has got everybody asking the question, will Reform UK hold the balance of power at the next general election? According to this very big MRP poll of 5,000 people, it is predicting that there will be a three-way tie between the Labour Party, the Conservative Party and Reform. In the findings that you can see on the screen, on the left is the 2024 general election results, and on the right is the latest poll projection, which shows that the Conservatives would win around 178 seats, Labour around 174 seats, and Nigel Farage and Reform UK around 175 seats, which would be a dramatic rise from the 5 seats they won only a few months ago in July 2024. What this poll shows is a most likely government outcome would point to a Conservative Reform coalition. Look beneath the bonnet, however, and you'll soon find some other remarkable numbers in the latest polling. Reform is the most popular party in the country among men, according to the recent YouGov poll. It's more popular than the Conservative Party among the middle-aged, and it's the most popular party in British politics, again, according to that YouGov poll, among the working class. And why not? After all, isn't it these groups that have been smashed to pieces over the last 30 years by the elite consensus in this country, by a rampant globalisation that's worked well for big business, worked well for London, Oxford and Cambridge, but much less well for ordinary, hard-working, tax-paying British workers. An elite consensus that's imposed an extreme policy of mass uncontrolled immigration on the rest of us. Again, a policy that works well for the virtue-signalling elites in London, Oxford and Cambridge, but which now even the Office for Budget Responsibility concedes is bringing millions of people into Britain who are a net fiscal cost to the country and our economy. An elite obsession as well with net zero, which is pushing up energy prices and decimating our traditional energy providers, forcing the shutting of factories, a loss of thousands of jobs across working-class towns up and down these islands, and perhaps most visibly, most importantly of all, by our broken borders, which is making a mockery of our claim to be a self-governing, independent nation which controls our own borders and keeps our own people safe. Is this not why we are seeing all of this churn and change in the national opinion polls today? Because so many people out there, I think many of the people watching this show, are utterly frustrated and fed up with the policies that have been imposed on them by the Uniparty in Westminster for much of the last 30 years. Now, as ever, let me know your views. I want to hear them at gbnews.com/yoursay or hit me up on X at GoodwinMJ. Now, I'm joined tonight in the studio by political commentator Susie Stride and former spokesman for Reform UK, Gawain Towler. Now, Susie, thanks for joining us. This MRP poll suggests we are on the cusp of something we haven't seen in British politics before, a sort of Conservative Reform coalition. I mean, how much do you believe this kind of polling? Do you think this is credible? Do you think perhaps it's midterm polling that we should maybe not read too much into? I mean, what's your take on all of this?
I mean, I think, look, we are 4 years out from a general election. But what I do think, and what is very important, is we have to always, I mean, humility is something that's often missing in politics. And I think what you have to be is really humble and listen to, well, why are people, responding in this way to polls? And, I keep saying to people, you've got to look at America, you've got to look at what's happened there. The Democrats ultimately overlooked working class people and were punished for it. And we've got to think here, as the Labour Party and just generally in politics, there are a section of people that do not feel listened to, that feel overlooked, that don't feel represented, and that is a problem. Now, this poll, do I think this is the reality of what's going to happen in 4 years' time? No, I do not. And I don't think anyone can say that because we don't have that. There's no scientific, correlation that means because there's a poll now that's going to happen in 4 years' time. What it does mean is we've got to wake up and we've got to listen.
Yeah. Now, Gawain, we've been talking about this populist rebellion for more than 10 years. And we talked about the left-behind voters more than 10 years ago, but we weren't seeing numbers like this, Nigel Farage with 175 MPs.
No, we hadn't had such shocking government for the previous 10 years as we have had now. We haven't had such a litany of failure, of disillusion, as we have had now. Now, for specific issues, specific regions, you had those moments where UKIP and the left behind you wrote the books about it. They did pick up, but in very specific ways. In the European parliamentary elections, it was an opportunity for people to safely say, I've had enough of you. Because it was a European parliamentary election, nobody cared.
Yeah.
But this is Westminster polling, and people do care about Westminster.
You've worked on the communications press side of the Nigel Farage movement. Is there a risk here that the biggest challenge of all that's facing reform is going to be expectation management? I mean, when people get used to seeing these kinds of numbers, as an insurgent party, it is hard to manage expectations.
It is indeed. Without a shadow of doubt, that's a big problem. Or not a big problem, but an issue. I would say that I sometimes wince a bit when I hear the sheer numbers of seats being quoted by some senior people in and around the party. I'm a traditional old-fashioned English pessimist. So I feel it's just like when we were watching Trump doing his inauguration, and it says, I'm an Englishman, I might agree with him, but by golly, I couldn't possibly say things like that. It's so optimistic, it's so upbeat, it's so positive. And I think, to a certain extent, Reform right now is trying to play a similar playbook of being that sort of positive about how they're looking at things. And, I mean, Caesar's absolutely right. This is 4 years out. To me, it's almost watching the summer friendlies before the serious game starts being played.
Yeah. Susie, we've seen Kemi Badenoch come out this week with her counter to reform. She's announced a new policy to make it harder for migrants to be granted indefinite leave to remain. We've also seen this week the Labour Party announce an anti-reform unit that Labour MPs are going to be advised on reform-related issues. I mean, do you think Labour have got their arms around the scale of this challenge from reform in lots of the areas in that map that we just looked at, areas like the Red Wall, the North East, the North West, areas like Wales? Labour MPs get the scale of this challenge?
I think, look, I've run in a marginal, so I ran against Robert Halfon in Harlow, OK? This is 2011, 2015, and I think, look, going back then, I can tell you there's always going to be those in the safe seats that probably don't fully understand the full scale of it because you're day in, day out knocking on doors in a marginal seat.
Yeah.
However, I think there is a big wake-up call here. I think we're in a very different place to what we were back then 15 years ago. I think there is a great understanding that there's a lot of people that have great concerns about immigration and then that needs to be a top priority. I won't say some of what was going on back 15 years ago on that. So I think we are in a different place. But look, do I think they probably fully got their heads around it? No. I think they're on a journey. But, I mean, I'm not saying that as a criticism. I'm saying that as a country, I don't think we have the answers to some of these problems.
Yeah.
And also, I think there's also something about, as just been said, look, we all should be concerned about the fact that lots of people feel disillusioned. We all should be concerned about the fact that, as has just been said, the Tory government left prisons in a state, hospitals in a state, housing in a state. We want British people to have confidence in our politicians. And obviously something about Nigel, who I've met many times, is the man speaks, he's a bit like Trump in the way that he just kind of speaks and says it as it is. And I'm a big believer that you need to have more people like that. You need to have more grassroots working class people. That's also part of the problem. It's the messenger and the message. Yeah. But I think Labour are getting there.
Well, let's bring that map up again if we can. I just want to show the viewers something because I think the fascinating part of this geography, if you like, of the reform vote is you can see Reform doing particularly well in Wales, North East, North West, all of those areas, particularly in Northern England, that went to Boris Johnson in 2019, then went back to Labour in 24, now look poised potentially to move over to reform. Now, of course, Conservatives will be saying, well, we're going to get those seats, we're going to be competitive in those seats by going hard on immigration, Gawain. They're going to basically try and outflank reform on immigration. They're also going to say, and I think this is an important point, Conservatives are going to say only they have the experience of governance, of understanding how policy works, understanding how Westminster works, and that actually reform might be the new kids on the block, but they don't have that parliamentary experience.
They're taking that in two parts. Second part, they have the experience of government, yes, and we've got the experience of them being in government. Frankly, that's not a selling point, not from this government. Reform will bring to offer the British public a diverse set of people, the like of which British politics haven't seen for over 100 years. The diverse background, the experience, the knowledge. You'll have a farmer, you'll have an undertaker, you'll have a dustman, you'll have a soldier, you'll have a fisherman. The range of experience that they'll be bringing to the table will be the like of that Westminster hasn't seen and the country has not seen.
Although that will also come with enormous reputational challenges and risks in just organising those people.
It won't be a reputational risk. Because the vetting will accede to that.
Right.
It won't be a reputational risk. What it will bring...
That has historically been a problem, hasn't it?
It has, but that's one of the main things that's changed since this last general election. But the risk, if there's anything, will be a discipline risk. I wouldn't like to be Lee Anderson as Chief Whip in those circumstances. However, that range of people will be better than we've seen for many, many decades. So there's that. And as I said, the Tories have come up with an immigration policy. We've had those before, haven't we? And they've failed and failed and failed and failed. And I cannot see the people of this country trusting them on this one.
Well, either way, I think we're going to continue to see these remarkable shifts in the polling. Certainly this week suggests something remarkable is going on out there in the country. Now, after the break, we're going to be asking the question that I think everyone around Team Trump is asking, which is, are we now witnessing the end of woke ideology? In this country, Lego, get this, has been slammed for claiming that Lego bricks promote gender stereotypes. Tory leader Kemi Badenoch has vowed that women-only spaces will be protected. Meanwhile, Trump has said the era of gender gobbledygook is now over. We're going to be discussing whether that's true after the break. Join us in a couple of minutes. We'll get straight into it. See you.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
TikTok chefs, Instagram chefs, that they put children off or young people off of cooking because it's so expertly done they can't do it. No, my young lad, he's 17, he is amazing in the kitchen. Oh, he is. He's amazing in the kitchen. And he gets it all off TikTok. He comes down, he can put burgers, wraps, stews, curries, sauces, and the smells in the kitchen. I said, where'd you get these? Oh, just TikTok, I'm trying it out. And it's just amazing the things that he can conjure up. So for some people, it might be... it's an inspiration for him. So they're saying that it's intimidation. For my boy, it's an inspiration. They say it's entertainment. For my boy, it's an infomercial. I watch him doing his stuff. At that stage, I could do baked beans on toast and knock up a salad. That was it. But my boy can do all sorts of stuff.
It makes it accessible as well, doesn't it? Because lots of people say, like, you need an education to be in the kitchen, or you need to go find yourself loads of cookbooks. But you don't.
No.
You go on your phone now.
Well, I mean, like, all the spices, sesame oil. I mean, I'm amazed at the stuff that he does. So it's encouraging. All you just need is a kitchen well-stocked and have a go. And understand that failure is actually the route to learning. I mean, he's made mistakes, he's stuck stuff in the bin, but that young man, I am amazed at some of the stuff he does.
I don't mind cooking at all. It's cleaning up that I have the problem with. Dawn, let's talk about
Can I just say there are things called restaurants, by the way? Just put that one. My hell, I don't even know where the kitchen is.
OK.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to State of the Nation tonight with me, Matt Goodwin. Now, Lego has come under fire after a museum claims that Lego bricks, get this, promote heteronormativity and are therefore anti-LGBT. The criticism stems from the idea that the studs on top of the bricks are considered male, the holes underneath are female, and the act of connecting them is referred to as mating. I know. This controversy arises against the backdrop of a growing backlash against gender and identity, with current President Donald Trump, Trump 2, declaring yesterday, from now on, women's sports will be only for women. In support of this stance, Tory leader Kemi Badenoch has vowed that when her party returns to government, or if her party returns to government, women-only spaces will be protected. Joining me now to discuss all of this is the programme coordinator at the Battle of Ideas, Mo Lavat. Mo, thank you for joining us this evening. Are we witnessing, with Trump 2, the end of this ridiculous gender gobbledygook ideology?
Well, it's certainly a positive move, isn't it? I mean, how delightful was it to see all those women and girls cheering the end of the injustice that we've experienced in women's sports? It really was exciting. I think there's some positive turns on the horizon. I don't think we're over yet. I think we've got a battle to come. For instance, I hear this week the Labour government in Wales is considering banning dogs from certain areas in a bid to tackle racism. How it does that, I have no idea. So we're not seeing the end of it yet. I mean, we've had a couple of generations now sort of soaked in this ideology, and they now run the institutions that we see woke, like the museum you talked about just earlier. They are setting the narrative. They are letting people sort of decide what they can talk about and what they can't talk about. So I think we've still got a battle on our hands, but certainly the Trump election was a big turning point.
Mo, can I just ask, because one thing I don't quite understand, and I've never really understood, you've got this big pushback from Trump. You've had the Cass review here, which has shown there's not enough evidence to be pushing children onto puberty blockers and down medical pathways to transition and so on. And we know all this stuff is really unpopular among most voters. We know only about 10 to 15% of people support all this woke madness. So what I can't understand is why it's still being shoveled into our schools, into our universities, into the NHS, into our army and military, into the civil service. Why hasn't the so-called expert class, the people who are supposed to be on top of the research and knowledge, adjusted to this new reality and looked at the US election and looked at the Cass review and thought, you know what, actually, this dogma, this woke ideology is no longer fit for purpose?
Yeah, I mean, if I was going to be really radical, Matt, I'd say we have got the most unintellectual political class in history. I mean, they really are not very bright. You know, you're right, but they dismiss things like the Cass report, as not being biased. You know, you've seen it time and time again with government reports that have come out and shed light on some of this stuff. And I think partly it's because they think we, the lower orders, the working class, are so bigoted that we need our minds changed, you know, in terms of racism and sexism and all the rest of it, which is ironic because that's such a bigoted view. So they are the bigots, you know what I mean? But I think that they live in this sort of virtue signalling world where they don't think deeply about the effects these policies are having on people. I think that's the nub of it.
Well, thank you. I'm just going to bring in the panel here, Mo. Gawain, there is something going on among the elite class across the West whereby they are deriving social status, esteem, kudos from other members of the elite class by preaching this woke stuff. It's become, you know, Rob Henderson, the Cambridge academic, calls it the new luxury belief class, that unlike in the past, members of the elite used to derive their status from things like wealth, money, you know, butlers, estates. Today, it is about preaching this woke ideology which wins them applause from other members of the elite class, but we all have to go along with it. But surely, you know, the emperor is not wearing any clothes. We can all see how ridiculous this stuff is.
Yes, you start with Lego, and it's preposterous. But what is, I think, interesting, and you were talking about how Trump is impacting on things. I don't think it's going to instantly impact here, what Trump's doing, because, after all, it's not here, and we have a government that is completely wedded to the virtue-signalling class. Though it does remind me a little bit of the sort of 1820s, when you have evangelical Christians pasting their views, and that becoming a luxury belief of that time. And so it's not unheard of in this country to have that sort of a belief system as a luxury belief. But I think one of the things that's been happening in the States in the last week with the Doge experiment and the discovery of the funding, not just in America, but the funding of the woke virtue-signalling ideology out with America, across the world. And I wouldn't be at all surprised to discover very soon that significant organisations in this country were being funded by US aid to push that agenda. And at that point, things start to break here.
Well, just before I come to Susie, Mo, if we wanted to root this stuff out here in the UK like Trump is doing, where he's getting rid of DEI, diversity, equity and inclusion, he's taking on the federal Department for Education, you know, he really is slashing and burning key parts of the woke complex. What would we need to be doing here in the UK to bring that kind of action into our politics?
I mean, I think the thing with Trump is he's got the hide of a rhinoceros now, hasn't he? And he's really equipped, and he's had one term and he's come back again. And we need that sort of vigour, I think, in the UK as well. I don't quite know who that would be. I'd quite like to see Dominic Cummings in a room with Robert Lowe and see what came out of that kind of discussion. But it really does need, you know, a kind of concerted effort to weed this stuff out, or to build new institutions, which many people think is probably preferable. I think one of the things I would say as well is, you know, in the Victorian era, you had academics, intellectuals, artists. They often sided those educational reformists with the working class. We've now got that kind of intellectual class of artists and museum owners and all the rest of it, who actually side with the elites against the working class. So it's a very different kind of beast to what we've had in the past. But as I say, we're making great strides, and more people are speaking out. Mark Zuckerberg, Stephen Fry. You might ask where they've been all this time, but you know, people are speaking out more and more.
Sure, Susie. It does appear as though this, you know, wokeism, woke ideology is sort of out of touch with the new culture. It seems as though, you know, the counterculture, the anti-establishment movements, you know, they've got the tailwinds behind them. It just seems all this woke Lego nonsense is just out of touch with everybody now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just reading about this Lego story. I mean, just completely absurd. You know, I mean, I think for people like me that are in politics, because I've worked with poverty-stricken kids in the East End of London, I read stuff like this and I just think it's a joke. You know, and my problem sometimes with the diversity stuff is the biggest dividing line in this country is class. It's white working class boys actually that are some of the most disadvantaged, and actually this diversity stuff doesn't help those kids. You know, so I don't have a problem with everything that we say is woke, but I have a problem with a whole chunk of this stuff because I actually find it to be quite unjust, because we're not helping the most disadvantaged people. We're not helping pick up the people that are like poverty-stricken and in situations which are not, you know, their own fault. And actually, we want to live in a country where everyone can thrive, doesn't matter where they're from. That's my big fight, and this stuff doesn't help that. You know, so, you know, and I'm not saying, and not just to correct, sorry, just to say, Labour Party are not all. Wes Streeting actually was the one that said, actually, we're going to ban puberty blockers, and Wes has actually been very strong on that issue, and so I think it's important to...
But that is a swallow singing in the darkness.
Well, look, I think ultimately we do need to come to a more balanced place on all these things. But as I say, my big thing on this is, you know, we seem to bang the drum of certain things because certain groups have certain lobby groups. But who are the lobby groups for the kid that died because he had damp in his bedroom? Where's the lobby group for that kid? Don't find them anywhere, you know.
Yeah, but we do. I mean, there is something to this point about, you know, if you look at the education system, for example, the worst performers at every level are white working class boys. Yeah. Yet the elite institutions in this country, you know, and I've just been talking about this
but they're
in
bad
this
people.
week.
They have bad views.
But for Oxford, Cambridge, etc., you have scholarships that are often only available for students from minority backgrounds. But these kids aren't really fashionable enough to get.
They are not fashionable because when they and their parents grow up, they have the wrong views. They are bad people. They are they're beneath the salt. They're beyond the pale. One of the things I've always found rather amusing about British politics is the Labour Party has for years been terrified of its voters. They don't like them. They certainly wouldn't invite them around for tea. And the Tory party also frightened of their voters. This is where Farage picks up, because he finds people quite interesting and he enjoys their company. Whereas the upper echelon of both major parties, and the Lib Dems and that, are frankly terrified of their voters, terrified of the people they're supposed to represent, hate what they stand for, hate what they believe in. And what they believe in goes, the idea, as you're right, Susie, the Lego thing, if you mentioned this, anywhere, I can't think of anything. Honestly, outside a seminar room, I can't imagine anybody in this country thinking Lego is sexist because it's got knobs and all.
Susie, I do remember Andrew Sullivan, the American writer, saying that we're living through the greatest radicalisation of the elite class since the 1960s, that people in the institutions have gone so far to the cultural left, they've gone so far beyond where the average voter is, that lots of people out there are looking at the institutions that are dominated by these people. They're looking at the museums, the galleries, the publishing houses, they're looking at the universities, they're looking at what's coming out of them. And they're sort of all asking themselves this question of, what on earth has gone wrong among the people who are supposed to be the enlightened, powerful, ruling class that are, meant to be the experts in the room, right? And I think there's something to that.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what's gone wrong is you don't have working class people in these positions, and that is problematic. I always say the last place where it doesn't matter what your class is, it doesn't hold you back is probably football. If you're working class, you're still going to do, because no one's going to stop you kicking a ball against the wall. But anything else, your class is, and it's changing. And now it's changing. You're absolutely right. But don't you love that Harry Kane is a great footballer and he's working class? I just watched Tottenham last night against Liverpool, so I'm slightly heartbroken. But we'll put that to one side for now. My dad and brother were up there. But the problem is we don't have those people in the room. Now, I do want to say that Morgan McSweeney, for all the ways that you guys may dislike him, Morgan actually, I think, does get it. He's got that blue Labour thing about him. I think he does get it.
This is Keir Starmer's chief of staff.
He's a working-class Irishman. I've had a good old chat with him. I think he does get it. I think there are people in the Labour Party that absolutely do get it. But we're trying to catch up. It's been many years, and we've got to change as a country.
Mo, the Labour government, just briefly before we leave this segment, the Labour government is growing up and it understands what's going on. Is that true?
The thing I should have said earlier is this fight is coming from the bottom up. It's the working class that are going to win this. I really do think that. But the Labour Party knows, so out of touch. I mean, some of the rank and file membership, yes, those MPs that meet their constituents, but they're overpowered by this terrible party machine that uses the whip and kind of scurries around to get people to vote in one direction or the other. We've seen that a lot in the assisted dying act. So, no, the party machinery is so tightly controlled, and the leadership are as woke as ever.
OK, well, thank you for that, Mo. I'd also like to thank Susie Stride for her impromptu appearance this evening. In a moment, house prices in this country, forget that. In a moment, as Ed Miliband is forced to backtrack on his net zero pledges, is this the beginning of the end of something else that Western societies have been having to deal with, namely net zero? Join me in a few minutes and we'll be hearing from the country's leading expert, I think, on net zero about what on earth is going on. See you.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
A wet start to this weekend in Mallorca, but the rain should be clearing from the Balearics by Sunday. Plenty of showers to come across Italy. Lots of fine and sunny weather over the Greek islands. A bit of a chilly breeze, though, blowing here across Turkey and Cyprus. Some wet weather, as I said, across Italy and the south of France, looking pretty soggy. That rain clearing away from the Balearics. Plenty of sunshine across the Canaries. That should last through the weekend into the early part of next week. Sunny on Sunday in Barcelona.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Heading towards the weekend, still plenty of cloudy skies, also some showers and a little bit of hill snow, and it's still going to be remaining chilly in those brisk easterly winds. That's all thanks to an area of high pressure across Scandinavia, bringing us this brisk easterly flow. So it is going to be feeling chilly in the winds, and it is dragging in some cloud, also some rain and some showers across the southeast, pushing up into Wales and central parts of the UK. And this is likely to bring some snow across the hills of Wales, perhaps even the Pennines later in the morning. But a slightly different story to the northwest, clearer and drier here, likely to see some frost during the first part of the morning. Now, for the beginning of the weekend across the south, it could be quite a damp start for some, with some showers, these merging into longer spells of rain, particularly across parts of East Anglia and the southeast. So quite a murky start to the day, perhaps a few clearer spells across Cornwall. And similar across Wales, northern parts of England, quite a cloudy start, but clearer to the northwest of Ireland, northwestern parts of Scotland. But here, that's where we're going to see the frost. And we will start to see some showers just edging their way into eastern parts of Scotland too. Once again, we could see some winteriness to these showers, particularly across high ground and the hills of Scotland. And that's pretty much the setup for the rest of the day. Still a fair amount of cloud around. It could be quite drizzly at times. Still a chance we could see some flurries of snow across high ground in Wales, parts of the Pennines, and the best of the brightness once again to the far northwest of the country. But for all, it is still going to be feeling like a chilly day, particularly in exposed spots in those brisk winds. For the second half of the weekend, once again, plenty of cloud around, but the best of the brightness still across northern parts of Scotland, perhaps less so across parts of Wales. For many, it's going to be a cloudy day, some drizzle at times, and still a very small chance we could see some winteriness across the hills. And that cloud sticks around for the beginning of next week too, and that means temperatures are going to struggle, so still feeling rather chilly. Bye-bye.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes and Co weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to State of the Nation tonight with me, Matt Goodwin. Now, the Secretary of State for Energy and Climate Change, Ed Miliband, has dropped his opposition to building a third runway at Heathrow Airport. He seems to be softening to the fact of Heathrow Airport expansion plan of having a third runway, having previously threatened to resign over the expansion in 2009 and voting against the plan in 2018. Is Labour and Rachel Reeves' determination to bring growth pushing pressure on the man who believes in net zero, or is this yet another U-turn from a member of the Labour cabinet? Joining me right now to discuss this down the line is Director of Net Zero Watch, Andrew Montford. Andrew, thanks for joining us tonight. Can you just bring our viewers up to speed in terms of what on earth is going on with Ed Miliband's net zero madness? Is he actually beginning to step away from this project, or is he instead pushing the pedal down?
I think he is trying to keep the pedal pushed to the floor as far as he possibly can, because he is nothing if not a green ideologue. But ideologues have this problem, is that their ideas eventually bump up against reality. And that's what Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves are suddenly having to deal with. The painful fact is that the economy is in a terrible state, and there just isn't very much money to go around. So Ed Miliband has been pledging spending at the most extraordinary rate of knots. I mean, in his first 100 days, he was on pledging something like £500 million a week or something. I mean, it was just crazy spending, and that can't go on. The economy can't afford it anymore. So, I think the reality is he's going to be dragged kicking and screaming away from his green ideas, because the country just needs growth so badly.
Andrew, if I may, I mean, what are the costs of this project for the people watching this show and the people listening to this show? You know, what are the costs for the jobs that are being lost, the factories that are being closed? Do we have any way of calculating what the downside is of the net zero project? Yeah,
various people have estimated what the whole net zero project might cost. Most of them I would describe as greenwashing or whitewashing. Yeah, they're trying to hide the true cost. The true cost is probably going to be running to sort of 10 trillion plus, I would have thought. So yeah, it's completely unaffordable. We've already seen that electricity prices have doubled in real terms between 2002, when we started doing this, and today. Okay, we've been through the Ukraine war and prices soared. Mostly they've come back down again, but you can see what has caused the rise between 2002 and now, and it's mainly renewable subsidies and the cost of dealing with the intermittency of renewables. But there are all these other costs as well, things like you're forcing people to buy electric cars and heat pumps, which are more expensive. And the economic costs of those build up. The cost of energy being so high, we now have pretty much the highest electricity prices in the developed world, if not the world as a whole. Industry can't deal with that. We have already deindustrialized to the most extraordinary extent. Essentially, we've just shipped jobs off to the Far East. People have been flung out of work. So we've lost our aluminium industry. We've lost most of our steel making. Coal has gone. The North Sea is in a terrible state because companies can't see a future there, and people are losing their jobs. And for years we've put up with politicians saying things like, "Oh well, we'll have a just transition," which I assume just means they're going to put people on a training course, once they're flung out of work, and then nothing actually happens. And we've been living with this delusion for 2 decades now, and essentially, the cows have come, the chickens have come home to roost.
Now, one of the parties, Andrew, if I may, one of the parties that has been campaigning aggressively against net zero is Reform, who have been perhaps outside of the Westminster consensus on this issue. We've had some polling recently that shows the British public might be becoming more sceptical of net zero, more aware of the cost. Do you think this issue is going to be dragged increasingly into the mainstream of national political life? Do you think it is going to become a key fault line at the next election?
Absolutely. Reform, of course, are the only party who are united against this issue. The Conservatives, I think, will see Reform shooting up the polls and will go, oh, maybe we actually need to be more sceptical on net zero. But of course, they will find it very difficult to do that because they have a huge green lobby within their party. And, I think Kemi Badenoch's position is not secure enough to confront those people. But we see now that Labour are in exactly the same position. There is a growth lobby within the Labour Party, and there is an ideological green lobby, and the two sides, I think, are going to be at loggerheads. So I think Reform are going to make hay out of this because they are the only party that is united on the issue.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Well, I think we're going to be hearing a lot more about the costs of net zero in the months to come, that's for sure. Andrew, thank you so much for walking us through this increasingly salient issue. Now, in a moment, house prices in this country, according to the news today, have reached a new record average high. And unless we can get house building up and net migration down, the housing crisis is going to get a lot worse. We are going to be speaking to one of the country's leading experts on the immigration crisis and how it relates to housing in just a few minutes. So come back right here in a few minutes and we'll get straight into that.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
People living with obesity are people, and they deserve the right for treatment and care as much as anyone else. What we need to understand is that obesity is a chronic condition, or a disease, as some people call it. It's not a choice. And this is the bit that people really struggle with, is that people think this is a lifestyle choice and people have done this to themselves. What we now know is the science and the evidence shows us that this isn't a choice. People have genetic predispositions for living with obesity. What we need to do is be a bit more compassionate and caring to people that live with obesity and support them to make healthier choices, not actually just discriminate and tell them that they're doing something wrong when, you know, if I had asthma, for instance, you wouldn't be saying the same thing to me there. But then it's exactly the same.
Usually if you're going for an operation of some form or other, there'll be often there is a criteria. So my mother, she had a knee operation. They wanted to make sure her blood pressure was right and all these things. This is, I mean, to hear somebody say that obesity isn't a choice just because you've got genetic predisposition to it, it's just exactly why people seem to be legitimizing being overweight. Ozempic has proved that people are overweight because they eat too much. Because Ozempic tells you to stop eating, it makes you think that you've eaten and makes you feel full, so you don't eat. You may be predisposed to anything, but you also have a large percentage of responsibility to make sure that doesn't happen. So absolutely, it is in the patient's best interests, because if you're overweight, it'll take you longer to heal. You're more likely to have complications, the same if you smoke, and also the outcomes are usually better. So for a smoker, if you quit, say 4 weeks before surgery, your 25%, your risk is lower of respiratory complications. So this is literally, of course, it's discriminatory, because you have to decide, you have to prioritise the people that are likely to survive the operations.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to State of the Nation tonight with me, Matt Goodwin. Now, house prices have reached a new record average high as the Bank of England has just cut interest rates, with Halifax reporting a 0.7% month-on-month increase in January, bringing the average property price just short of £300,000. Now, this surge comes amid a decade-long shortfall of 1.34 million homes that are needed to match our population growth, and without a significant boost in house building, alongside a reduction in those eye-watering net migration figures, the housing crisis is set to get a lot worse. Joining me tonight to discuss this is Carl Williams, Research Director at the Centre for Policy Studies. Carl, I've wanted to have you on this show for a long time. You have talked a lot about how migration, the bananas numbers that we're seeing in this country are worsening, exacerbating our housing crisis. Just tell us what's going on, please.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm really grateful to hear you mention that 1.3 million stat, Matt, because that was from CPS research originally. And we've been in a situation for a number of years now where the house building target for England has been about 300,000 homes per annum. But with recent levels of net migration, we need to be building at least 500,000, maybe more than that. So we've come from a position where in England we were still 3-4 million houses in deficit a decade ago. And that's just got worse and worse. And it's like we're running up and down escalators whilst trying to fix the housing crisis. And the big news today, depressing but not surprising, has been about house prices. But also it's very important, I think, to talk about the rental markets. So rents are up by 9% year on year across the country, 12% in London. That's not surprising because house building is particularly stagnant in London, and that's where migration tends to be concentrated.
So this crisis essentially is, I mean, it is on every measure getting worse. What about the argument that, okay, this isn't really about mass immigration, it's more about the supply side and the failure of successive governments to simply build on as much land as they can, and if we just keep building and we just cut through the regulation, actually the immigration part of this becomes redundant?
I mean, there is a kernel of truth there in that we have been underbuilding for decades. Now, as I said, even a decade, 2 decades ago, we were millions of houses short. But with mass migration at the levels we've been seeing, especially in the last 4 or 5 years, it's very hard to understand how we can catch up, just because even if you substantially reform planning and so on and start building, you're always running up that down escalator.
It is remarkable looking at, Labour pledging to build 1.5 million homes. I think I'm right, Carl, in saying that around 800,000 of those are in order basically to keep up with the demand from previous migration. And then at the same time, we've got these forecasts over the last week showing that we're going to have another 10 million people coming into the country by 2047, which isn't really that long away. I mean, that's really only 22 years. Where are 10 million people going to go?
Well, indeed, and this shows up in all sorts of other measures, like the average sort of size of a house shrinking, the number of occupants per house increasing, especially in the southeast where you have these homes of multiple occupancy. So there's, it's slightly harder to mention, but there really are sort of tangible impacts on people's living standards because we're not building enough and because migration is far too high. Absolutely. Well, thank you, Carl Williams from the Centre for Policy Studies. I'm delighted to say we are joined by former Labour advisor Stella Santakiru. This is a big problem for the Labour Party, right? As Carl is saying there, he is the guy who's done a lot of this research. Building houses is not going to be enough. We've got this excessive demand that's driving rent, 12% increases in London, driving these record house prices. It's got to end.
Wow, strangers, immigrants, they are both too poor to be here and to contribute to our economy. And at the same time, they are the reason why our houses are becoming more expensive. That is the logic that underpins how toxic the immigration debate has become. There is a serious conversation to be had about the numbers of immigrants that are coming in. Under the Conservatives, that number has tripled, which is exactly the opposite from what we expected after Brexit. But the reality is that we have not been building enough for successive governments. And this has been under the Conservatives for the last 14 years. I have no hope that the Reform Party, which is propped up by millionaire property owners, landlords, is going to have a solution to this, apart from just reducing immigration to net zero, in which case I would like to ask who is going to build all of these houses, where we already know that the construction industry has a massive problem with hiring enough workers to build these houses.
Gawain, Reform Party doesn't have what it takes to fix this crisis, which, according to Carl Williams, is only going to get worse.
If we accept supply and demand, if you accept that if you have house prices go up because there's limited quantity of them and vast numbers of people needing them, and it's not just immigration, it's also family breakdown. It's one of the things that people don't dare talking about, that causes pressure on housing, then, of course, the price is going to go up. And you might say this is not possible, but if you've got a bath that is full, you turn off the tap in order so it can cool down and you can deal with the issue. And that is going to be essential. Now, when it comes to the building, of course, we have to build. But looking at those things, one of the things we are uglifying and destroying this country while being forced to build vast quantities of cheap jerry-built houses.
Well, 10 million people coming into the country over the next 22 years, according to the government's own forecast, is
I suppose they can all live in
unbelievable, pretty remarkable numbers. Now, thank you to my panel, Stella and Gawain, plus, of course, Susie Stride for stepping in earlier on. You've been watching State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin. I'm back on Wednesday evening, right here at 8 p.m. to talk through the big issues that matter to you, the forgotten majority. But right now, thank you for tuning in. Stay with us. We're going straight to the weather in just a few seconds from now.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright look for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Heading towards the weekend, still plenty of cloudy skies, also some showers and a little bit of hill snow, and it's still going to be remaining chilly in those brisk easterly winds. That's all thanks to an area of high pressure across Scandinavia, bringing us this brisk easterly flow. So it is going to be feeling chilly in the winds, and it is dragging in some cloud, also some rain and some showers across the southeast, pushing up into Wales and central parts of the UK. And this is likely to bring some snow across the hills of Wales, perhaps even the Pennines later in the morning. But a slightly different story to the northwest, clearer and drier here, likely to see some frost during the first part of the morning. Now, for the beginning of the weekend across the south, it could be quite a damp start for some, with some showers, these merging into longer spells of rain, particularly across parts of East Anglia and the southeast. So quite a murky start to the day, perhaps a few clearer spells across Cornwall. And similar across Wales, northern parts of England, quite a cloudy start, but clearer to the northwest of Ireland, northwestern parts of Scotland. But here, that's where we're going to see the frost. And we will start to see some showers just edging their way into eastern parts of Scotland too. Once again, we could see some winteriness to these showers, particularly across high ground and the hills of Scotland. And that's pretty much the setup for the rest of the day. Still a fair amount of cloud around. It could be quite drizzly at times. Still a chance we could see some flurries of snow across high ground in Wales, parts of the Pennines, and the best of the brightness once again to the far northwest of the country. But for all, it is still going to be feeling like a chilly day, particularly in exposed spots in those brisk winds. For the second half of the weekend, once again, plenty of cloud around, but the best of the brightness still across northern parts of Scotland, perhaps less so across parts of Wales. For many, it's going to be a cloudy day, some drizzle at times, and still a very small chance we could see some winteriness across the hills. And that cloud sticks around for the beginning of next week too, and that means temperatures are going to struggle, so still feeling rather chilly. Bye-bye.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Want to be one of 2 lucky Great British giveaway winners? That's right, you could win one of 2 prize bundles, which includes a brand new iPhone 16, £500 in shopping vouchers to spend in your favourite store, and an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. What would you spend that cash on? For a chance to win an iPhone, vouchers and £10,000 in cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
It's Patrick Christys tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christys tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date. Or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, it's 9 p.m. and this is Patrick Christys Tonight with me, Alex Armstrong. But don't worry, Patrick will be back as usual on Monday. And you know me, I won't be holding back tonight. Everybody is in the firing line. Well, tonight on the show.
After Mauritius elections, the government will move towards treaty signature, and it is then our intention to pursue ratification in 2025.
Island drama? No, it's not Casa Amor, it's Chagos Chaos. The PM's tangled in a web of personal connections, stirring up a storm over this botched deal. I'll be telling you all the latest on that. And
it's amazing to us to welcome us, even though we are from Great Britain.
Labour's Attorney General, the chief